Hi, welcome to One Eye on the Page. I am Scott. This is 5-Year Battle Agatha Christie. We are down to the semifinals and finals. We're going to pick the best Agatha Christie book. We got our final four, and we're about to go into it. Okay, we started with the years 1921 through 1925, and we went through 11 5-year periods, except for the last one, which I extended a little bit because she published a book 71 to 76 and also one book in 1997. I picked the 76 book and the 97 book and put them in the 71 to 75 because it wouldn't have been fair to just have one book for those other 5-year periods. But we have 11 5-year periods, came down to 11 books. They were The Man in the Brown Suit, Mrs. McGinty's Dead, The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side, Curtain, Ordeal by Innocence, Endless Night, And Then There Were None, The Mysterious Mr. Quinn, Death Comes as the End, Murder on the Orient Express, and Crooked House. I had 6 books fight against each other, one versus one, set of 3, to get them into the 8, which uh, and then there were none. Mysterious Mr. Quinn, Death Comes at the End, Murder on the Orient Express, and Crooked House were already in. And The Man in the Brown Suit, The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side, and Endless Night won. And then we went to the quarterfinals. So, and then there were none faced The Man in the Brown Suit, and I picked And Then There Were None. The Mysterious Mr. Quinn went off against Death Comes at the End. I picked The Mysterious Mr. Quinn. Murder on the Orient Express battled The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side, and Murder on the Orient Express went forward. And Crooked House went off against Endless Night, and I picked Endless Night. Endless Night has gone from like basically a playoff game. It's into the final four. So anything can happen. Now, those of you who have watched my 5-year battle Stephen King know that it's never over till it's over. My final four there were The Stand, Different Seasons, It, and Insomnia. If you know me, you know Insomnia is one of my favorite books. My criteria for picking the winners of the 5-year battle, it's my favorite, the best, instinctual. I will say when I did my list of all 91 Stephen King books, Insomnia was number 2. The number 1 was the book that I picked as number 1. It in Different Seasons was number 3 on my list. The other book in there was number 15 on uh, my list. But I will say you have, and then there were none, in Murder on the Orient Express, which they seem like most likely the final two to face off against each other. As I mentioned before, and then there were none is the top selling mystery book of all time, one of the top selling books of all time. I believe I read that it was number 8 of all time, all books. Murder on the Orient Express, probably Perot's best known novel, best written novel, possibly. One that is ripe for adaptation, sometimes great in the 70s, sometimes not so great a few years back. But we also have Endless Night, which is a bit of a mystery, a bit of a horror novel, I would say, a bit of a psychological book. It's the little book that could, because it I think it had a bit of a battle to get picked in the first 5 year battle for the. It had a bit of a battle to be picked in the first 5 year battle, the 5 year period, and then it eked out a win in the sudden death, and then it beat Crooked House to end up in the final four. And then there's the mysterious Mr. Quinn, which definitely stands out with these other books. It's a short story collection, short stories that all involve the characters Mr. Satterthwaite and Mr. Quinn. It's got a bit of a supernatural uh, tinge to it. It's it's a bit gentle-hearted, especially for Christie. I mean, there is some darkness in it, particularly in the last story in the collection, but I feel quite comfortable using the word lovely with this book. It's just a lovely book. This book is my insomnia. This book is the one that I want to pick this as number one. I did not read this book until last year. When I first read Poirot in the 80s. Poirot. When I first read Christie, it was Poirot. That was pretty much what I read in the 80s. I think I read And Then There Were None. I did not read Miss Marple. I did not read most of non-Poirot Agatha Christie until a year ago when I decided I'm going to read everything. And so I did, except for Mary Westmacott, which I now have read all of, and I shouldn't have. But yeah, I was all pro. That was what I read as far as Christie. So I had not read anything about Mr. Satterthwaite and Mr. Quinn. And Mr. Satterthwaite is my favorite Christie character. So that's my emotion says that's number one. But my emotions is not the only thing that I'm using. What am I using? I don't know. It's my emotions. It's what book is best written. What which book has more of an impact. It's instinctual. It's guesswork. But yeah, my heart is the mysterious Mr. Quinn. My mind is And Then There Were None or Murder on the Orient Express. Uh, my belief in the underdog is Endless Night. So let's get into it. Let's go ahead and rip off the band aid. If I'm going to suffer, let's get it out of the way. So it is And Then There Were None, published in 1939. Again, Christie's best selling book of all time and a blueprint for a lot of other mystery novels. I talked about it last time. You probably know, but 10 people are on an island. They are told that somebody believes that they are all murderers and they will be punished. And then they start to die one by one. And there's nobody else on the island. So it has to be one of them, right? And as each death happens, paranoia sets in, people turn against each other, and there's an order to it. Why is each person killed in their time? Which is always an intriguing thing for me to think about because I don't agree with the murderer. I think there are possibly a few on there that did not deserve to be punished, and I don't agree with the order. But, again, this person is a murderer. Might not be right in the head, and I'm not going to argue with that person. Then we have The Mysterious Mr. Quinn. It's a collection of 12 short stories about Mr. Satterthwaite and Mr. Harley Quinn. Mr. Satterthwaite is a confirmed bachelor. I believe he's in his 50s or 60s. He is he's a lovely man. I, that's probably the best description of him. He's a lover of art and music and gardens. He is often referred to as having a bit of a feminine side. And generally, if you see something like that written about a male character in a Christie novel, that's not good. But I think a lot of the Christie rules, the Christie tropes, they don't apply to Mr. Satterthwaite and Mr. Harley Quinn. This is almost a completely different world, even though Mr. Satterthwaite does exist in prose world because he is in a couple of prose stories. That's another thing that I love about this book is it's completely different than any other Christie book, but it's going up against and then there were none. Again, my heart says, what book would I read again next? Without a doubt, it's The Mysterious Mr. Quinn. But it also knows you've also read, and then there were none, probably 4 or 5 times. You've only read The Mysterious Mr. Quinn once. So, of course, you'd want to read the book you haven't read as much. Which book has the greatest cultural impact? No question about it, no contest at all, and then there were none. My heart says Mysterious Mr. Quinn, my mind says, and then there were none. This I think is the battle of this video. I'm going to have to go with, and then there were none. I just I can't. They're both excellent books. I think they're both written very well. Obviously, and then there were none was plotted much better because plot was very important to that book, not as much to a collection of 12 short stories uh, in which the mystery wasn't as important in it. Mystery was important, but not as important as it is, and then there were none. I am going against my heart here, and it hurts, but I am going to pick, and then there were none. I just, I'll be honest, I tried to arrange these 11 books so that the Mysterious Mr. Quinn could last as long as it could, which meant I tried to keep it away from And Then There Were None and Murder on the Orient Express because it beats every other book. It had to face them at some point, and those are two books. And if I had it face off against Murder on the Orient Express, would it win? I mean, I've already made a decision. I don't know. A lot of the reasons I picked And Then There Were None, I would have to consider for Murder on the Orient Express. So I am going against my heart and I am saying, and then there were none. And then there's Murder on the Orient Express. There's Murder on the Orient Express. And then there's Endless Night. Endless Night, again, the little engine that could. Didn't expect it to be here. This was my underdog that just, it shocked me. I didn't expect it to be in the final four. Okay, yeah, it was gonna beat Ordeal by Innocence no matter what. But I didn't think it was gonna make it past the quarterfinals. Again, it's a bit of a horror novel, bit of a psychological novel, bit of a mystery. It's a character study. It's got a bit of a gothic feel to it. It's a very intriguing ending, but also an ending I don't know that I like, just the abruptness of it. And Murder on the Orient Express, possibly the best pro novel. It is the best Poirot as a character, I think, in any of his novels. Poirot has a habit of sometimes being annoying, especially later Poirot when Agatha Christie, quite honestly, got sick of the little Belgian, and it was evident. And also, she got older, and she was apparently, based on her novels, not fond of young people, and so Perot, who seemed a little bit charming, wasn't as charming anymore. But this is written. When is it published? Is it 1934? 1934. This is at the height of her publishing. This is right in the middle of her golden age. I mean, I could talk about the two books more, but it's uh, there was a very good chance that this was always going to be, and then there were none in Murder on the Orient Express. And honestly, I think the only chance that it wasn't going to be was the mysterious Mr. Quinn. That was probably the only thing for me that was going to prevent this final two. It's not a very surprising final two. Sometimes you can't go for surprising just to be surprising. These are the final two for a very good reason. I almost want to just like had these two battle and then the mysterious Mr. Quinn just come in at the end and get the pin like Brock Lesnar. Wrestling reference. Don't worry about it. We know the mysterious Mr. Quinn is number one in my heart. So that will be its own special number one. That will be its participation trophy, and it deserves it. But we have to pick the number one for 5-year battle. Murder on the Orient Express, and then there were none. There's not a detective, and then there were none, although there are people trying to solve a mystery. Uh, I love Pro, especially in that golden age time period. I like Pro from the get go. I hated Hastings, but I liked Pro from the mysterious affair of Styles till I forget what book it was, but 1942 is when she started to take a break from him, and she didn't publish another Pro novel until 1946. And after that, that's when it kind of fell off the rails a little bit for me as far as Pro, with the occasional good Pro, but that period up until 1942, Pro was generally great. Wasn't always in great works, but the character was pretty good as long as Hastings wasn't around. Hastings sucks. Okay, my final Hastings sucks for this. I enjoy Perot. There's nobody to root for, and then there were none, if that's something you care about. This is not a novel for you to necessarily care about them. Many, possibly all, of the characters are unlikable, but I feel empathy for several of them. Uh, I don't necessarily believe that the punishment is warranted for some of them, and I think that's an intriguing thing. I also think the solution to Murder on the Orient Express, that is a bit of a philosophical thing there too. Whatever Pro did at the end of that novel, which you probably know what it is, but for those of you who don't and are watching this anyway, he makes a choice. And there are many philosophical reasons to pick one or the other. Also, did he pick? Did he pick? Now, if I had And Then There Were None and Murder on the Orient Express, which one would I read again? I probably read both of them the same number of times, roughly. Uh, Maybe I've read Murder on the Orient Express more just because I was really into Pro when I was a teenager. I'm probably going to just edit out like 20 minutes of me just sitting here thinking about which of these books are going to be number one. We have Murder on the Orient Express and Then There Were None. This book is new. It looks a lot better than this book. Maybe that's why I picked this book. This book has gone through a lot. You know I've read this book. So, Murder on the Orient Express. And Then There Were None. Yeah, it's got to be And Then There Were None. Obviously, best-selling mystery book of all time. The plot works in this. The plot in here is great too. But when I go back and reread this, I don't read it looking for clues to try to basically see how the magic is done. It's I'm not saying it becomes clear upon one reread, but it becomes clear pretty quickly how the magic is done. I still think if I go into this and reread it again, I will still find a little something in here that's like, oh, okay. Um, is it perfect? No. No Christie book is perfect. Perfectly plotted? Probably. But Christie is Christie and she has her things. And, you know, there are characters in here that are pretty much Christie tropes by now. But just a great read. You have probably read this. You probably read Murder on the Orient Express. So I will just make one small plea. You don't have to like it. You may not, because my tastes are not always the taste that other people have. But drop the book. Give the mysterious Mr. Quinn a chance because it really came close to being number one. I just couldn't, with a clear conscience, do it. But with a clear heart, yes, I could. So that is the end result of 5 Year Battle Agatha Christie. The number one Agatha Christie book is And Then There Were None, barely beating out Murder on the Orient Express. Two books that we probably figured would be at the end, but we covered a lot of books that are still great books. And we covered a few books who were utter dog crap. And she's got a lot of books. She's going to have some misses. So, but overall, reading Christie for me has been an experience. Sometimes you discover a book. I'm going to make this all about the mysterious Mr. Quinn. I'm going to stop now. Number one book is And Then There Were None. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment. What is your favorite Christie book? Is it a Mary Westmacott book? Is it something that we would not expect? Leave a comment and tell me why. Thanks for that. I don't know when I'm going to do a 5 Year Battle again because the only one I can really do is PG Woodhouse, and I have not finished all of PG Woodhouse and finished most of PG Woodhouse. So I will be doing some other special videos. Wait and see what they are.